Hi everyone, and welcome to the Real Talk podcast, hosted by me, Daisy Gideon. As an award-winning journalist and filmmaker with more than 4 decades of experience globally, but now based in apparently one of the most dangerous cities in the world, Beirut, I decided that the perception of the world was wrong about Lebanon and Beirut, and took it upon myself to prove that fact by introducing you to real people with real stories through my Real Talk podcast. So expect to be surprised, illuminated, entertained and educated about Lebanon and the Middle East through this series. Every episode will take you on a journey into the homes, heartland and highlights of a diverse range of people, from locals to foreigners and artists to activists, and unearth the timeless secrets and stifling syndromes that keep this once jewel of the Middle East paralysed, whilst at the same time untamed and unashamed. So thank you for joining me, and 1,000 blessings to those who also support me through your generous donations. It is only through the assistance of people like you, who expect the media to provide a level playing field, an unbiased discourse, a free and fair point of view, that my team and I are able to continue to seek the truth, produce these reports and share them with you. So click on the donate button below and send whatever you can afford to help keep those stories coming. And please remember to follow me on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and all my social media platforms. And if you like the podcast, then please tell your friends about Real Talk or share the link. Wouldn't the world be an amazing place if we all amused ourselves with more of the truth and less of the propaganda? I think so. Thank you for your faith and support.
You said you're from Israel? And you're single? You ever think about stealing a Palestinian woman's boyfriend? You left already? You left though, yeah?
A long time ago.
Oh, okay, cool. Good for you. Glad you got out. Yeah, respect. That's how it should be. We're just having a one-on-one. Just Jews being Jews.
It's absolutely my pleasure to have Michael Schirtzer with us today, the co-host of the Palestine Pod. So great to have you with us. And just as important is the fact that you're an American Jewish comedian. And watching some of the stuff you've done, researching you was so entertaining and so enlightening and so inspiring. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to and bring your voice to my audience and to people around the world. So welcome to the show, and thank you very much for joining in this advocacy for Palestine, but more importantly for human rights as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and sharing your platform with me.
Pleasure. Now, I wanted to explain why. I did mention it briefly, but the reason I found you was because I got asked to do a pod with the A2 Squared show, the boys Ali and Saeed. I looked up these guys and I was looking through the people that they've done pods with, and it took me a while going down because all these interesting pods, but nothing to do with the topics that I'm interested in and that I'm speaking about, which is Palestine, truth, justice, Lebanon, and all those big issues. And then I found your pod and I watched it all the way to the end and loved it. I was so impressed. I didn't want to stop, and I thought, we need to talk to this guy. So that's why we're having this conversation today.
Thank you so much. I believe that's the only time I've ever been booked from that podcast.
Well, it worked. Look, before we get into the heavy stuff, let's start with something light so people can get to know who Michael Schirtzer is. So let's start with your career in comedy and how long you've been a comedian and why you chose to do comedy.
So I've been doing comedy for about 10 years. I started in Los Angeles and started doing open mics because I had worked in politics previously, and I was doing courier jobs of like dropping checks off at Congress people's office so that they would show up and kiss the ring. And it was very disgusting work. And so I quit that and I was like, how could I actually make an impact? And the people who were important to me were comedians, like Richard Pryor and George Carlin, and people who I thought were able to shift people's consciousness, because I always felt like one of the largest shifts that needed to happen was people's consciousness needed to shift before they were even ready to talk about Palestine or Lebanon. It felt like their minds needed to shift. And so I was like, how can I set that course in motion? And yeah, I'd, been doing comedy for about 10 years. I've been doing advocacy online for Palestine and Lebanon and Yemen and other places that are affected by US imperialism for about 5 years. And so, it's had slight adverse effects on my comedy career, but that's all well and good. I would sacrifice everything. Like Zionists have reached out to every major comedy club in Los Angeles, trying to make sure that I don't get booked there. Joke's on them, I already don't get booked there. So,
but wow,
kind of a waste of their time. It was the first they've heard of me, actually.
So I was going to say, when did comedy turn from light comedy into the heavy, meaningful stuff? But I guess it was always there. What you did, from what you just said, is you used it as a platform to shift people, but you wanted, and I get this because, a lot of really intelligent people, use comedy to cut through, because people aren't ready to listen to the heavy, serious stuff, but they'll listen to it if you give it to them in a joke. The problem is, I find, is then getting them, because Lebanese, let me tell you, you need to come to Lebanon one day when this shit's over, because we are the
I'll come
funniest.
Right now.
Yeah. Well,
give me a gun. Put me on the front lines. What are you talking about? Like,
the Abu B's there, my producer, he would welcome you in a second. I unfortunately had to get out. But the Lebanese are so amazing at comedy. They will turn anything into comedy, because we've lived with such disaster for decades now. Not as much as the Palestinians, God help them. But they will, in a second, they've turned something really serious into funny. But my point is, do we get lost in the comedy then and we don't take re-election? Do we just shrug it off, or we just... I get really frustrated, because I think we're so clever at doing comedy, but then, well, how are we going to change things if we're just laughing about it and being satirical?
Well, you're not always laughing, right? Comedy's not always about laughter. Comedy comes from tragedy. Comedy comes from pain sometimes. And so it's not only a way of dealing with that pain and maneuvering through the everyday life of feeling that pain, but it also delegitimizes the occupier, right? It's a way of saying that what you're doing is so flagrantly stupid that nobody should even respect it. The only appropriate response is mockery. And that's what I've really respected about the coverage of Ali in Lebanon, the journalist who's on the front lines, just mocking, smoking cigarettes, talking about, hello, my enemies. Like, that dude is the epitome of what it means to delegitimize an occupier.
Hello, my enemies. May you have a very, very, very bad day. This is Bayad Blida. If you need to do something with the fence, or if you need to do something with Iftah, just tell me, huh? I'm already here and always here. Your soldiers are running. I don't know why. They are afraid, maybe. Like you are not here. You are not on the border. But the Lebanese are still on the border. Take care, ya baby.
Great. Yeah, great answer.
Thank you so much. I do this professionally. Hello.
Okay, let's go to the Palestine Pod. You said you created it to counter the narrative surrounding the Israeli occupation of Palestine, which from one point of view, or their point of view, completely defends all the actions that that are undertaken by Israel and the Zionist regime, and their viewpoint is always right, as you've said, and they are always the victims. And they, in their narrative, say we're forced to take these horrible actions to defend ourselves. We don't want to do this, but we're forced to take these actions, which is the language we're hearing day in, day out, have been hearing for the last 12 months in Palestine, in Gaza. The occupied territories are now in Lebanon. So tell us about that and why countering that narrative became so important to you and Lama.
Well, really quickly, is that relatable to anybody? Is anybody like, oh, I so accidentally slipped up and did a genocide because you made me? Does that make sense to anybody? That's like what the Nazis said when they got caught, right? So they're already laying the groundwork for like distancing themselves from accountability. And that's why you've seen the introduction of these stories about like AI generate, like, yes, they are using AI to generate targets, but they're trying to insulate themselves as people, as groups of people, as units, as systems that should be and will be held accountable for these war crimes. Anyways, let's back up to like where I actually started to figure out what the fuck was going on with Palestine and how I'd been brainwashed as an American Jewish child and person. I was in college. I was in a Jewish fraternity called AE It is, I accidentally, without knowing, joined one of the largest like Zionist organizations in the United States. Just because I was like, I want to be around other Jews, you know, seemed harmless enough at the time. Anyways, they put you through what's called hazing, which is like an initiation process. I don't know if your audience is familiar. It's extremely stupid, but it largely consists of like IDF torture tactics. So what, an IOF, I don't know what your audience prefer. I say IOF, but you know, like people will be like, how do I? Anyway, IOF. So it basically consists of IOF torture tactics. Please use that take. And so I basically found myself with a group of 10 other guys, 8 Americans, and then 2 guys who had served in the occupation army. And we were all in this dark room with our hands tied behind our backs. We were blindfolded. They were playing loud music. We were in there for hours. It was like sensory deprivation, torture, whatever. And so, you know, the 8 American guys in this pledge class, we were all very uncomfortable because we'd never been openly tortured before. Can you believe it? And then like, and then the guys who had served in the occupation army, the Zionist guys, they were like laughing. They were having a good time while they were tied up and blindfolded. And I just remember, because when you are tied up, your other senses take over. Like you can't see that well, so you can hear super well.
Yeah.
And so I just heard them cackling like hyenas. And it still haunts me to this day. And so I was like, hey, what are you guys laughing about? You guys are giving off big psycho energy right now. And they were like, it's so funny because we used to do this to Palestinians all the time.
Wow.
And it was like, boom, you know, in that moment, my whole life shifted because I'd never heard anything negative about the occupation of Palestine, you know, what idiots call Israel. And so it changed immediately how I thought of everything I'd ever heard. Because they didn't stop there. They went on a diatribe about what else they did about torturing Palestinians and stuff. And you've actually seen, I don't even need to spell it out for you because you've seen it play out through the images, through the videos in the last year. And they changed the course of my life because I was also walking through the quad the next week and I ran into an SJP display. It was an Apartheid Week display at UCSB. SJP is obviously Students for Justice in Palestine, the college group campuses all over the country that set up encampments and stuff. So this was back in probably 2010, I want to say. And I was walking through campus and I saw the apartheid display, and I'd never seen Israel and apartheid in the same sentence before. And I just walked up to the display and talked to people, talked to the Palestinians there who told me their story, the stories of their families. And I was in a place where I was like ready to receive that information. And
Right.
it absolutely floored me. And so, I started doing what I thought was like good work at the time. I was like real behind the scenes. I was doing like petitions and attending protests, like extremely white people behavior. And then I was like, I'm making a difference, I felt real good. I was patting myself on the back daily. And then I
Good.
kind of got radicalized in 2020 when I just saw what was happening to Gaza at the time. I was like, wow, there's literally a genocide happening in Gaza right now. Nobody's talking about it. Like what is going on? I felt like I was crazy. There were a few people talking about it, obviously, the people who have always been steadfast to Palestine, but it felt as though there was a media blackout, which there was. We know now there has always been a media blackout about
Yeah.
Palestine and about, West Asia in general.
Yeah.
And so I started making videos about how dumb Zionists were and how stupid their talking points were and how idiotic their representatives were. And I just kept dragging Zionists online. And then Palestinians found my videos in where they were like, who is this Jew? Because it wasn't like super common. Like now, anti-Zionist Jews are a dime a dozen, but back in the day, like we were harder to find.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And even to this day, like anti-Zionist Jews who actually support the resistance, we are still a dime a dozen. Okay.
That's what I was going to
So,
ask. Yeah.
lot of normalizers in those JVP, if not now, organizations. They are built on liberal Zionism, and they are a mechanism to maintain Zionism, to save the image of Zionism, right?
We'll get into that. We'll get into that.
To funnel a lot of people who would show up for otherwise revolutionary action into urgent art builds and things that are not really making a difference or moving the needle.
Distraction.
Yeah.
Distract them from the real issues.
Yeah. If you have that many bodies, why not go after weapons manufacturers? If you have billions of dollars, millions of dollars in your budget, why is AIPAC winning every election and then bragging about it on Twitter? Why is every AIPAC tweet like, you got to watch out for Russian interference? Next tweet, we won all of our races. Anyone who said anything negative about us has no job now. Watch out for Russian interference.
So you're talking about the Not in My Name people as well?
Yeah, all those liberal Zionist organizations.
I'm the co-host of a podcast called the Palestine Pod. Has anybody heard of it? Hell yeah, we have a marketing problem. That marketing problem? Censorship.
My awakening online, I was like making videos, and then Lara found me, Gazan girl. And we were just like fans of each other's content. And we were just, hey, like what you're doing, sending messages, stuff like that. She was talking about international law, and, she's obviously well versed. She's very intelligent and outspoken. And I loved everything about her. And so we connected, and she reached out to me, and she was like, we should do a podcast. And then we started the Palestine Pod. And the first episode was super well received. It was shared by a lot of people. It was, people felt like it was a great project to support because I'm not a normalizer. I'm somebody who's in it for the full liberation of Palestine, right?
Yeah.
And so that's like a big deal
Rare.
when you're talking about
Very
from
rare.
the Jewish perspective. Then obviously she has the perspective of being Palestinian, having to live her life in forced exile and trying to learn such a expert level understanding of the law that she can use it against the occupier who expelled her. Right? Like it's kind of a chilling story when you think about it. And, so we've developed like a bond that will last forever, obviously. And she's like a big sister to me. She means the world to me, and everybody should obviously check out her work and what she's doing. She's fantastic force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I've seen some of the pods that you guys have done, and they're excellent. And she's so pro, and you guys just work so well together. And yeah, again, it's another reason why I thought this is a great, you're a great candidate to bring to people. There's so many good people out there working for good causes, especially this one, the most important cause. But people have got to, introduce them to other people, and that's the way we can help each other. But the most important thing is that we find each other and then we talk about each other and we share each other's stories. But I think, for me and my audience, I think they love to really connect with people who are of Jewish background, who are working so strong for humanity. This is so critical. Palestine is the biggest human rights injustice of the last century and now this century. It's been going on for so long, and as long as I can remember, when I was studying Middle East politics and doing political science at university and then working in the field as a journalist, the Palestinian problem has always been the crux of all issues that keep coming up over and over again. And it was even 20, 30 years ago, it was the world will never be safe or at peace until the Palestinian problem is solved. And we are seeing that even more so today. So good for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I do want to say that Jewish advocacy for Palestine is no more important than anyone else's advocacy for Palestine. And American Jews ought to stop centering themselves and their feelings, because there is a literal Holocaust happening to Palestinians. And you seem very silly when you're talking about, ooh, this made me uncomfortable. It's like, well, do you know what's uncomfortable? Hellfire missiles.
Yeah.
You know what's uncomfortable? 2,000-pound bombs that vaporize bodies so that they can't even be recognized or counted as dead. That's why you have a death toll that on the so-called media has been stopped at 40,000 for, months now, when you have the Lancet that came out with 186,000, I believe. And
That's
then you
right.
have Susan Abu Hawa, who said it could be as high as 500,000. And I trust her.
Yeah.
I trust the Palestinian doing the research that everybody else is copying, right?
Yeah.
I trust the
I'm with you.
Palestinian when they say that we're being genocided, and this is how many people are genocided in this genocide. Like, what are you talking about? Plus, there's like that history of the UN being like, the Palestinians have never lied about a death toll. They're actually very honest when it comes to their death toll. And it's like, how twisted is it that not only are they experiencing a genocide, they have to defend how many? That's literally Holocaust denial.
Yeah.
Are we not reading the room? They're not. They're illiterate. Anyway.
Now that Lebanon has gone through and it's starting to go through that, and you've got blocks of buildings in South Beirut that have been, annihilated, they've been decimated. And you have a death toll that comes out of it where they say 6 people were killed, and we're going, are you kidding me? I mean, they haven't got the bodies out because they haven't had the chance to get the bodies out. And what we're experiencing right now in Lebanon is that we don't even have the equipment. People are asking for emergency equipment to get in there because they can hear people, 20 meters underneath screaming for help, but they don't have the equipment in all the areas that Israel's bombing around the country. And this is the problem, is we're not going to get to the right death toll until there is peace. And the same with Gaza. They're not going to get the right death toll because they don't know where anyone is. People have lost count or lost track of their own family and relatives, and a lot of them are under the rubble and will never be accounted for until this disaster, this Holocaust comes to an end. And you're right, the numbers are probably more between 200,000 and 500,000 in Gaza.
We had Dr. Perlmutter on the podcast recently. He just got back from a medical mission to Gaza, and he showed me some of the most gruesome photos I've ever seen. Children torn to shreds. And I don't know how many more images people need to see before they're like, hey, maybe a protest where we get photos and then arrested and then just go back and do nothing. When do we escalate? right? When do we say that, hey, these tactics we've been doing literally forever are not working? But you know what is working? The direct action of Palestine Action, the group that is smashing weapons manufacturers. And look, I'm not telling everybody they need to go smash up a weapons manufacturer. I understand this is an interview that's being recorded, right? What I what I am saying is that if you feel that way, you can sign up and do that. And if you don't feel that way, if you're not physically capable of doing it, but you support that mission, you're not like somebody who could get up and smash a weapons manufacturer. You could buy a sledgehammer for somebody who would, right? So I would encourage people to do that. It's the most effective way of stopping the war machine when you are in the imperial core. And if you're somebody who is like, I think we should do something different, then what you're saying is you think there is a higher priority than stopping weapons shipments to the occupation that we know will be used to bomb and vaporize people. Yeah. What is your bigger priority? You know, and then the people are like, we got to vote for Kamala because if we don't, we'll have Trump. And I'm like, yeah, but who is vaporizing children right now? Is it Donald Trump or is it Kamala? Kamala Harris. People are mad when you say only one of her, like part of her name. Oh. It's so funny how people are mad that you're like not saying the name of the person doing a genocide. I'm like, that's like somebody being like, actually, it's Adolf Hitler. Okay, actually.
Instead of Hitler.
So, yeah, like, what do you like? You're getting a little too familiar, but it's like, okay, well, who cares? They're doing a genocide, huh? How about that?
Look, I agree with you. You know, one of the frustrations and, you know, is about
also, I want to say that's not really quick. Sorry, I just want to say that is not an endorsement of Donald Trump. I'm actually going on record as endorsing the Green Party, Jill Stein and Dr. Butch Ware. Dr. Butch Ware is a friend of mine. I know him well, and I trust his judgment. And obviously, Jill Stein has been in the trenches for years. So yeah, I would endorse those candidates.
Good move. Americans should all vote for Jill Stein.
I want to say I don't think electoral politics will save us. I know that as somebody who used to deliver money to politicians, right? So I have that perspective of like, this is not the system that is going to save us. It is the right thing to do if you think voting matters, right? Which some people do, and that's fine. They're young and naive, or they're old and dumb, and I can't help them. But they, you know, it shouldn't be the only thing that you do, right? You shouldn't be like, I'm showing up to the polls and therefore my work is done. Like, you need to be engaging in direct action. You need to be engaging in mutual aid. I'm a part of a number of mutual aid networks, Mutual Aid LA Food Not Bombs, LA Food Not Bombs. What we do is we take unused produce that would go to waste otherwise, and then we repurpose it into hot meals and sometimes like fresh salads, fruit salads for the unhoused population in downtown Los Angeles, also known as Skid Row. And it's really great work. We do it every Sunday. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no worries. I'm not trying to, not for that.
No, it's great to know that, like, you know.
And then there's also another mutual aid effort that I'm actually missing right now to do this interview because I value media as well. But it is where we pick up, like, from a warehouse, we pick up thousands of pounds of food, pallets of food, and then we pack them into like personal vehicles, and then we transport them to another location, also in downtown Los Angeles, but different demographic. It's more like abuelitas and stuff who come through and get groceries, and it's great. And then there's also a number of other, like, you know, revolutionary organizations in LA. So it is nice to feel like there's community, you know, and people who are doing work, but we're obviously heavily suppressed and, you know, spied upon by the police departments and harassed, and anybody who's doing journalism or activism that's worthwhile is a target.
Yeah, totally. That's why I left Lebanon. I got told you need to get out. So, I mean, look, there's so many different ways people can help. And you're right. Some people are much more courageous and willing to do, you know, the aggressive stuff. But I agree with you. Like the protests.
Like gardening or what? What are you talking about?
Gardening, yeah. Outside the weapons factory, doing the gardening outside the weapons factory. Yeah, that's what I agree with.
Hey, sometimes places just need a renovation, you know?
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
all we're doing is a little interior
Handiwork.
redecoration,
Handyman.
and they should appreciate that, right? They
Yeah.
love when buildings blow up, when their bombs are successful, right? They
We're
love
testing.
when buildings are disrupted and people are inconvenienced or killed, right? They love that when their product is successful. But if you do it to the
Successful.
place where they make the products, you're a criminal, you're a
Yeah.
terrorist, you're
Yeah.
getting prosecuted by many counties and federal government. Like you're
That's right.
so
Yeah.
what's up with that? It's
Persona non
it's
grata.
it's almost
Yeah.
like the people who are like doing the death are the problem.
It's all the double standards, it's witnessed every single day of our lives. There's always these double standards. So we can talk about that forever, but I want to go back to you because I had a
Okay,
whole
sure.
list of questions here about you.
Okay.
We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast and just wanted to remind you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you believe our work is worthy, then please support independent journalism and free speech by clicking on the button below and giving whatever you can afford. Thanks again. Now let's get back to the podcast.
What you got is me just now, okay? That is all of me.
And I love
My name
that
is Michael
side of you.
Schirtzer. I endorse smashing a weapons manufacturer.
But the heart of this conversation is like looking at what makes you this kind of Jew versus a Zionist Jew. I want to look at it from the perspective of looking at upbringing, family. You said you were brought up in a family that sort of tolerated Zionism, not necessarily practiced it or were completely pro, but I guess it led you in that direction. You were open to it, but you then came out of it. But give us an insight into what does it mean to grow up as a Zionist? Can you tell us? Because that help us understand, because I don't think I've ever heard of anything or really seen it. I've grown up in Australia, and we have sort of Jewish schools around in certain areas, and we know that they go to that school, and there's always a lot of security around their schools. And they're brought up with a lot of fear around them. And it was always like, how sad for you? Like, you've got to have guards outside your school and stuff like, and that I think is all over the world. But could you give us an insight into growing up as a Jew?
Yeah, so all Jewish spaces in the United States are colonized by Zionism. It's impossible to exist in any space, whether it's just like recreational or commercial or even religious, right? Especially religious, community without having Zionism be a huge influence, if not the dominant narrative in most shuls, right? A lot of shuls have the Zionist flag hanging. Imagine how uncomfortable that would make you if you didn't want genocide associated with Judaism. Anyways, I digress. So I grew up, not really knowing much about Zionism because they don't educate you about it. All I knew was that as a Jew, I had access to a free trip to what I used to call Israel, what I now call the occupation of Palestine. And even before I was like fully
At what
hip to-
age?
Oh,
How
I
old
mean,
were you when-
they offered me when I was like 16 all the way up until like 27 or I don't know. They just raised the age because they're desperate for bodies. They're desperate for more bodies to recruit to sacrifice in the front lines of Lebanon or in Jabalia, where they're committing genocide right now. So they told me about this free trip, and that's pretty much all you hear. You're like, it's so great. Everything over there is so amazing. Like the people so cool. Like they try and frame it as like, it's the best thing ever. And you never hear anything negative. You never hear anything about Palestinians, like at all. And so you grow up with this skewed understanding of the world. And you ask what makes me different from Zionist Jews. And honestly, I think it's literacy. Like I started reading. And I started reading Edward Said, and I started reading The 100 Years' War, and I started reading even Ilan Pape, who now I am not like even the most a big fan of, but like he was a part of my understanding at the time. Um, and Noam Chomsky.
Why don't you like Ilan Pape anymore? Tell me.
He repeated some of that nonsense about the fake sexual assault story and Hamas and stuff, and he's just, he is true an Israeli scholar. He's somebody who, anyway, he was a part of what I learned at the time. Same with Noam Chomsky. He was on Epstein's list, so now I'm not like the best, all of these people were part of my awakening. Like, you just learn from them and then you grow, and sometimes you outgrow. And like, my true big influence was Malcolm X and the autobiography of Malcolm X, and then Assata Shakur, the autobiography of Assata Shakur. All of like those two books helped to put in perspective everything that I needed to know. And then additionally, I read the Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That book also enlightened me about U.S. imperialism, U.S. aid, how the United States uses economic aid as a tool and has since the 50s, right? This takes us all the way back, well, not all the way, obviously, because the NECA was 48, but like, as far as like, it set up the sort of structures that we see in place today, where the lines were drawn and these lands were given away for a settlement project, for a Jewish colony, for Jewish supremacy.
That's a very, very, strong and profound reason for the shift is the literacy. And so many people even today...
And empathy as well, because they don't have that. Yeah. They don't have that. They see people like bleeding out and they start to make a video mocking it. So I think it was like the ability to read and also the ability to empathize and feel. And also, Jewish people are meant to be the underdog in a situation. Like, we're always meant to identify with the oppressed. Remember when Jews supported David instead of Goliath, right? It makes no sense for me to look at somebody who is doing a Holocaust and then identify with the person in the fucking tower because he claims that he's Jewish. And I'm paraphrasing something that Amanda Gellender said on my pod. It's insane.
Yeah. 100%.
Jewish history teaches you identify with the person who is struggling to be free.
Which brings me to the point, one of your best quotes.
Moses said, let my people go, not lock all these people up. That's a bar. I just came up with that one. Thank you so much.
That's right. We'll clip that one.
That might go in my stand-up.
One of the wilder things about growing up as an American Jew is you are raised to recognize fascism, and then you'll be like, Zionism is fascism, and those same people will be like, you must hate Jews. The call's coming from inside.
Leading to one of the best quotes I heard you say on the A Squared show was, it's hard to be a Jew and a Zionist given that Judaism says, do not kill and do not steal, and Zionism says, kill everyone and steal anything. And that was one way of
telling the difference.
It was fantastic. So, but literally, does Zionism literally tell you to kill and steal?
I mean, Zionism's got to be defined by its material conditions, which is over 75 years of murder, land theft, rape, forced displacement, bombings, terrorism. I could go on, right? The list goes on. How else could we define Zionism other than what has happened in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, right? And it's not just like what's happening on the ground there. The occupation, Zionism, it's responsible for technologies that are exported all over the world to oppress people in Latin America, right? All over the world, in Africa, everywhere. Zionism is connected to almost every like resource extraction operation. When you look at who is extracting resources in the Congo, it's a guy named Dan Gertler, okay, who looks like he is a extra in Planet of the Apes. The bro, like, and he is known as a like eco-terrorist. Basically, he sets up slave operations where he extracts cobalt, all of the things that go into the iPhone. And why is the Congo experiencing a genocide, right? Why?
It's horrible seeing those photos out of the Congo, and those kids, they're as young as 5 or 6. They look so young, and it's
Where
just
are they getting those
unspeakable.
weapons from? Right? Where are they? They actually had to bring back people who were training paramilitary in the Congo, the occupation did, because they were getting so wrecked by the like indigenous Palestinian defense, the resistance. They needed the people that were all around the world training
To come
to come back because they got wrecked by Hamas, by Al-Qassam.
And they're still trying to recruit now. They're trying to get the Jewish
They're trying to get the Orthodox involved.
The
They're
Orthodox
literally,
Jews, yeah.
they're trying to conscript Orthodox Jews who have never held a gun, and they're also trying to lure Africans who are seeking asylum. They're taking advantage of people who are displaced and trying to put them into a genocide. And they're giving them 2 weeks of training, and they're dropping them off with like Coca-Cola and a flak vest. They're sacrificing people basically because Al-Qassam is trained. Al-Qassam has snipers. They have, you know, surface to air missiles. Like they have a real fighting force. And then you also have Hezbollah, who is obviously one of the larger forces in the region, who can, you know, really put pressure and is putting pressure on the occupation as far as body bags are concerned. Like there are over 300 confirmed who are dead or maimed from the initial invasion of Lebanon. Good work, fellas. Right? And then there's 1,400 who ran away from their post. There was a group who was ordered to launch a counter offensive, and they refused to do so. And somebody testified that it was the first time they've seen that in 22 years of IOF terrorism service. Can you imagine the morale of this TikTok army when they meet actual fighters? They're used to literally sniping children and grandmothers because most adult age males are locked up in prisons.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I came
powerful.
to be. Because it's like, how can anybody call themselves a feminist if they're not talking about Palestinian women giving birth with no anesthesia? Are you crazy? Do you think I care about Hillary Clinton? You know what I mean? Like, that's my icon. The woman who is responsible for destabilizing Syria and destabilizing. She's actually responsible for Syria as well. But I meant destabilizing Libya and creating an open air slave market in Libya now. That's not my feminist icon. Like, more of a fan of Layla Khalid.
Looking into that upbringing, though, I mean, were other members of your family?
No.
They didn't follow the same path as you.
I don't need you to finish
You're the black
question.
sheep.
The answer is no.
Yeah. How does that feel, though, Michael?
Not great.
Yeah.
Still dealing with it. But, you know, it's not the most important thing. There are Palestinians who have lost their entire families, actually, right? And there's an article that just came out that said 902 families have been wiped off the registry.
Yeah.
And that's like the second time I've seen an article like that.
Yeah.
I remember there was another article months ago where they were like, all of these Palestinian families have been wiped off the registry. So it's like, yeah, look, if it's uncomfortable in my family, that's fine. Some of my cousins don't like me anymore, right? They're okay, get it, you know? Who cares? Literally, who cares?
I've got family in Lebanon who follow some of the political leaders that are the biggest crooks and have brought the country to, into economic ruin. And I shake my head at them, and I haven't disowned them or anything. I love them, but it's like they can't see the light. They haven't seen it. But this
What
is
I realized
different,
a long time ago, what I realized a long time ago is that I'm going to lose a lot of people, but everybody that I lose was meant to be lost. And I'm better off with the people who I've been in community with. I've got chosen family, and I feel so welcomed in certain spaces. And they say, go where you're watered, right? Like, go where you feel the most supported. And so I've really just been leaning into that, and it's been carrying me, because it is tough. You receive a lot of like nasty messages. Zionists, they don't care that I'm Jewish. They attack me specifically because I'm Jewish, because to me they can recognize like Jewish like equal human, right? And then like anything else is like no, so they have to address me with a certain like differentiation than they would like Palestinians, who they've easily dehumanized already. They're already talking about them like animals. Me, they have to attack me where they're like, oh, you just don't like know what you're talking. You're a self-hating Jew, right? That's what they always say, because it's like to them, Judaism means support for a genocide. It means support of land theft. Like, you have to be a big fan of apartheid in order to be Jewish to them. And then they always want to argue about apartheid with like Nelson Mandela, and it's like, that's not the guy to pick. They always want to argue about like civil rights with like Kwame Ture, and it's like, hey, that's probably not the guy to argue with. Anyways, I forget what I was saying initially just now. Oh yeah, about losing people.
That's very true. It is. Look, they say you don't get to pick your family, but you do get to choose whether you still hang out with them, or that's the path you want to take. And I'm with you. I've lost a lot of friends and family, well, not family, actually friends, but who were, I thought, friends and colleagues. Amazing. It's shocking. It really, but then I don't get too worried about it. I just like, well, wow, like that was important for me to actually see who they really were. There's Zionist or Christian Zionists or whatever. They're just not the people that they made out to be, and that's okay. I don't need to walk that path with them. Yeah.
You're better off. You're lighter, right? Your energy is better because you're not around people who are okay with genocide. You're not around people who are excited to support candidates who are supporting genocide. Like, how can you be watching images of children being murdered, images of people being murdered, images of elderly people being murdered, right? And like, then you are just putting your phone down and going to attend a fascist rally on either side of the aisle to support a genocide. That energy is bad, right? The energy is bad. And so when you're not around that energy, it's better for you. Your skin looks better. Have you ever noticed that Zionists always look terrible? Like, every time they come on to defend the genocide, they always look like they should. They look like the skincare they deserve is happening.
Yeah, they're evil. They do.
They send me the nastiest messages. The most vile, the most vitriolic, the most anti-Semitic messages I get are from Zionists. And they sent me a message recently where they were like, we're going to cut out your tongue. Wow. And I was like...
So you do get threats.
Oh, sure. I was like, that's fucked up. You guys know I love to eat pussy. Okay, what's going on? You are reading my texts. And I wish you would stop. Okay, that's a Pegasus joke. Thank you so much. Okay.
With your comedy, I mean, when you ingest that into your stand-up stuff, initially I was looking at some of the clips you sent me, and initially maybe it was a bit too sensitive. But how's it gone from when this started? To now, like when you go up and do comedy and you bring in the Palestinian issue and the audiences react?
Yeah, I just got off a tour in Europe featuring for a good friend of mine, Morgan J. He's very big on TikTok. And all over Europe, I talked about Palestine, and it was big pops all over. People coming up to me, thanking me for talking about it, especially in places like Berlin, where it's criminalized to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, people are arrested at their homes just for doing activism. So, you know, but there's such a need for people to be talking about it. And so, yeah, people were very happy to hear about Palestine. I think I sent you one clip where it was in Culver City and it didn't go well. Basically, like I mentioned Palestine and almost nobody clapped.
I'm Jewish and I support Palestine. Okay, thank you so much. Wow. It felt like time stopped in that moment. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It felt like I was at an APAC convention just then. I was like, am I in danger? Okay.
And sure, yeah, there's a bunch of fucking Zionist suits in the audience. As a comedian, you always perform for a bunch of different audiences and you're not in control of who's there, but you got to talk about whatever's important to you. And so I stood on business. I think I was even wearing a keffiyeh when I was like, it doesn't, you know, like I'm Jewish and I support Palestine. And that has gotten applause all over the country, all over Europe. But in that one particular clip in Culver City, which I sent you, you know, it didn't go well, and that's fine. It's pretty rare that people are not on board. Most people support Palestine.
You're absolutely right about Europe and Germany, how harsh they're coming down on the people.
Crazy what's going on there.
From the concerts, even music concerts, and you get big artists, and you've got so many celebrities who are speaking out. The reaction from the audiences is so loud and strong and united. So they all with the whole movement, but they're not all active in it. They're like, yes, they want somebody else to carry it. They want somebody else to drive it. I have an issue with, you know, but this is our issue. This is our generation has been called up to defend humanity right now. All of us need to get on board. I don't know how to get more people out there, but, you know, it's I posted something the other day saying it's black and white. It's right and wrong. There's nothing to decide. There's nothing more you need to know. It's that clear. And if you're not going to get out now, you're actually inviting danger, chaos, and, you know, disruption to your own local communities, because it's not going to stop with Gaza. It doesn't stop with Gaza or Lebanon. You know?
No, of course not. They're a threat to all of humanity, and people who don't realize that are willingly walking themselves into this trap, which will probably endanger their lives and the lives of people they care about and the lives of everybody involved, right? All over the world, because they have bought this fascist lie. It's so easy to disprove. And that's why I started making videos mocking it. Because I was like, it's so obviously dumb. People could surely see through this illusion, right?
Yeah.
But many people can't. Many people are brainwashed. And that's what's difficult to accept, is that there are many people who are happy to buy the lie. They prefer the
easy way,
which it's swallowed when you're like, well, I've never done anything wrong and everybody just hates the Jews, right? Isn't that like an easier thing to swallow than you're possibly responsible for maybe one of the most catastrophic events in human history? Like, it's probably easier to just be like, well, I think everybody hates me for the wrong reasons. You know,
victim.
And I'm not like sympathetic to that mentality. I came from it, right? I've done a lot of unlearning to be where I'm at. I'm explaining to people who are like, how could they possibly feel that way? That like from birth, because you see now they're putting out children's books about like colonizing Lebanon, right? And so from the very beginning of like your existence as a Jewish person, Zionism is trying to infiltrate your brain and turn you into one of its minions, right? If I wasn't like an empathetic person, I was around Zionism enough where I could have been misguided, right? I could have been leaned into something else. Like I could have been a different person. But because like I'm so glad that I am who I am, Palestine set me free long before I ever started to working for its freedom, right? Long before I ever started working for its freedom. Palestine
That's beautiful.
set me free. it set me free from Zionism. And Jews who refuse that same gift are burdening themselves. They are walking in towards a death trap, a literal death cult that is sacrificing Jewish people, right, in places where they are not fit to be. You're not even meant to be in the sun, let alone in a tank in Lebanon. Like, get out.
I hear. One thing you were talking about then about growing up and all of this indoctrination, did it make you feel, and you mentioned about having to unlearn everything, but do they teach you that you have to be frightened of everyone?
Yeah, of
Everyone's
course.
out to get you? Everyone's out to kill you?
Everyone hates the Jews. Everyone has issues with the Jews for years. There's never been like, you know what I mean? There's no, like, hey, maybe that's not what's happening, right? There's none of that. It's always, you got to be afraid of the other, right? And then the other is like an unidentified Arab, right? Somebody who's literally just wearing a keffiyeh.
Doesn't necessarily
just
have to
not-
be an Arab.
Yeah, could just be anybody who is not Jewish, right?
That's right.
They refer, like, that's how, like, the community refers to those people as goyim, right? And it's kind of a derogatory term where it's like those people are lesser. And anytime you try and create a fake barrier, a fake separation between people where you put yourself on a pedestal above other people, that's called supremacy, right? And so what you have from the river to the sea right now is Jewish supremacy. And that will come to an end in the very near future. And mashallah, it'll be a gift to the world when it happens.
I just think it's a tragedy, though. I mean, I remember this when I was covering the peace treaty. I covered the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. And I was in Israel. I went to Jerusalem, I went to Tel Aviv, and I went down to Eilat, and I actually got to go to the Gaza Strip. It was horrible. This is 1994. It was horrible. Nothing like the images we saw a year ago before the recent demolition of the whole country. But in that period, you know, and having studied the Middle East, but from the Jewish people, I was just saying to my friends, the fear that these kids and the Jewish people grow up with all their life thinking that people hate them. What a curse. What a curse. Why would you do that to your children? Why would you embed this terrible fear and hatred and, isolation in your children instead of filling them with love? It just is mind-boggling. It's horrible.
Yeah. Yes, you rob people of their humanity when you remove the ability to see yourself in other people, right? If you only see yourself within your insular community, then you never experience the joy of other communities, the pain of other communities, right? You're so disconnected from that idea that you're able to dehumanize them and justify their genocide and actively participate in their genocide, right? So that's what it's the largest, most effective brainwashing campaign known to mankind, right? It is literal Nazism. Like, I'm not even being facetious. These are Nazis. And the Colombian president agrees with me, right? And a number of people agree as well. Anybody who knows Nazis understands that these people are Nazis and what they're doing is a Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who had an entire group of my family wiped out by the Nazis.
I was going to ask you whether your family had been impacted by the Holocaust.
On my dad's side, yeah. But I also have family that resisted and then fled and then, settled in Toronto and started a Jewish communist organization and, started like a union and stuff. So radical Jewish communism is actually in my history, I learned, but it skipped a few generations because there's a lot of capitalism in between there.
Yeah, they got Nazis in the Ukraine. You guys know about that? No. Wow, you're about to find out. They have Nazis in the Ukraine and Nazis in Russia killing each other, which as a Jew, hilarious. Oh my God, is there anything sweeter? That's what we call in the biz a win-win. Okay, that's good stuff.
There's so much we could talk about, but let me go to this, take you off somewhere else for a minute about the impact in the USA. And one of the quotes you've said, and I've heard it quoted elsewhere as well, is that the US is the best investment Israel has ever made. And coming back to the impact of AIPAC and all of those lobbies that have bought America, literally bought America. Okay, there is this school of thought that believes that, and then there is a school of thought that says, no, God damn it, you guys are missing it. America is the greater enemy, and it's using Israel as its dog or bitch in the Middle East. And yeah, they take money, the lobbyists hand out those donations to the senators and congressmen and women, but there is an investment. Israel's definitely getting billions of dollars of aid out of it and getting political support, but it's to enforce and execute America's policy, America's agenda. What's your take on that?
I'm not super concerned about that, right? I think that what's happening is, yes, the occupation is an extension of US imperialism. And to that end, it's calling the shots. It could absolutely stop this if it wanted to stop sending weapons. And so the occupation is acting on its behalf. But obviously there are actors in the occupation who have plans of their own, who are like, dude, we're just going to kept catching the weapons and then using them against literally anything. We're growing this thing into greater Israel. Like, that's what they believe. So, who is in charge is obviously like a decision for like the courts when they're prosecuting people. What I'm super concerned about is stopping the weapons from being shipped, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can have conversations later on once the whole genocide is done about like who called the shots. Frankly, I don't think it's anybody in like the White House. It's a conglomeration of weapons manufacturers who are in charge, right? And they're laundering money through genocide. And they are murdering people and they're making money. Look at who's making money. That's how you know who's in charge. Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, right? Those companies, Boeing, the companies whose stocks are profiting, they have lobbyists that are also Zionists. And so it's like they don't even need to send lobbyists because AIPAC is already like, what you're going to do is you're going to launder this money. It's a trafficking and murder operation that if the courts ever decide to prosecute it, they'll have their hands full.
We need to stop the genocide first.
Yes. That's what I think personally. But I know that people often love to be like, look, there's actors who are dual citizens, right? Like Anthony Blinken is a dude who's like, his family is deeply involved in Zionism. And I definitely don't think Joe Biden is calling the shots, right? Like, it doesn't seem like that guy knows what the fuck is going on. He shows up for ice cream and then he's like, I gotta dip out for a nap, like that's his capabilities. He introduced Vladimir Zelensky as Vladimir Putin, right? Like, bro is not cooking with grease, okay? But it's interesting. It's like there's Nazis in Ukraine and there's Nazis in Russia who are killing each other, which as a Jew, hilarious. You know what I mean? You love to see it. Anyways, and also Joe Biden repeated that lie where he was like, he saw 40 beheaded babies, that terrible lie, which has been repeatedly debunked. He walked that back, which is difficult because he can't walk forwards. And it's
I
difficult.
People are picking up on your jokes.
Thank you so much. It's difficult because he thought he was looking at those pictures of beheaded babies, but he was actually just looking at pictures of his grandkids. I don't know if you know that. Anyway, yeah. So who is in charge is a theoretical discussion, and like people can definitely have it. I think probably it's a group of people who are like not really loyal to any particular like state. I think they're more like, I'll go wherever the fuck, like it's Nazism who's in control, right? Whether it's
talk about
politicians over here or politicians over there, Nazis are in control.
They talk about the Illuminati, right? And they talk about this cabal.
Who talks
that
about
is
them? Yeah. Name names, okay? If you want to bring up the Illuminati, I need you to name names of who talks about it.
Right, I'll refer to my references and send you to them.
Yeah.
I'll send you a bibliography. A lot of people also poo-poo it and say it's all conspiracy theories, but I don't know if you've watched The Blacklist. Have you seen The Blacklist on Netflix?
What is that? I'm on the Blacklist.
You need to watch The Blacklist, because The Blacklist is James Spader, excellent series. I think it's 3 seasons, phenomenal, and it's actually from real stories from CIA and FBI and whatever. But it is, I don't know how to explain it, except when I watched this last year, I was like, oh my God, this is actually what is running the world, what is happening in the world. And they're actually documenting it now, because there are obviously people who are willing to talk about it behind the scenes and make it into sort of fiction, but it's not really fiction. But you need to watch it. I highly recommend it, because it's all about this cabal. And the more I read, and I am I read and read and read. I got to get proof. I can't post stuff if I don't just, get credible evidence and all that kind of stuff. But I think that there's a lot of proof that this cabal, and it's controlled by, major financial institutions like your Vanguard, State Street, and, BlackRocks and those kind of people. And looking at this infrastructure, I've been doing a whole lot of research. People lead me to here, lead me to there. I feel like an, undercover cop or something, or an investigative journalist. But there is a much bigger picture. But to your point, right now we've got to stop the bombs from falling. But to quote Desmond Tutu, because this was profound when I was reading this. A couple of years ago I was reading a book and someone quoted Desmond Tutu, and he said, it's important for us to pull people out of the river, but it's also important for us to turn our head upstream and find out who's throwing them back in. So I'm in this quandary. Isn't it brilliant? Mm-hmm. Isn't that brilliant? It's like you need people to be saving people. You need people who are there, and their role is to save humanity so that we have a humanity to keep moving forward with. But we also need a group of people who are fighting these fuckers up the upstream to stop this cycle from continuing. So we've got to work this out. Good people who are on the right side, not on the genocide, to use your quote.
Thank you.
Need to do this shit the right way, because if we're still heads buried in saving, these guys are working out 50 million ways to keep us busy. They're spinning our heads.
Don't you love how all of the people on our side are history's most favored people, right? Don't you love how literally our martyrs are the most honorable people? Exactly. And then who do they have? Who do the Zionists have? Like Deborah Messing, Yeah,
exactly.
Zionists have Amy Schumer.
And Jerry Seinfeld, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I hate him now. I was really upset with him. So upset with him.
Well, he's going to make another movie about Pop-Tarts and then figure out nobody likes him again. What's the deal with the kids not supporting a genocide? Like, why don't they?
Yeah.
Why won't the kids support the slaughter of everybody else?
Yeah. Before we wrap up, because we're going over time, but I'm loving this, I want to ask you about what's the deal with the whole Christian Zionists in America? Like, isn't the deal, these Christian Zionists, from everything I've read or listened to them, is that they believe the second coming of Jesus Christ will happen when all the Jews go back to Jerusalem. They're either, they convert to Christianity or they get slaughtered. What the hell?
You got the story. That's it. That's their pitch. And
That's
as you can
perfect.
imagine, when they were pitching that all throughout Europe in the early 1900s, most Jews were like, I think I'm good. Thank you so much for that very exciting offer, but I think I'd rather not get raptured, you know? And that is how I know that like Zionist Christians, they don't know Jews at all because we would die in hell before losing an argument. Okay, that's crazy. Oh, there's
50,
lots.
80
Yeah.
million,
Millions, hundreds of
Christians,
millions of Christian Zionists.
50, 80 million. Yeah, yeah.
They are like a fundraising force for Zionism. The churches, they send tons of money. I did see recently the Presbyterian Church has decided to divest, which is great, like over 1,000 churches. But largely Zionist Christians, those fundamentalists, the people who are in those mega churches and stuff, they still support the occupation. And they believe this biblical story that like Jews will be raptured. And so, that's not a great deal. And I feel like if you're somebody who is using the argument that like Jewish people are somehow protected, like look at the people who are talking about this. They are talking about you being raptured or murder or converting or like, what are you like? Your allies are Nazis. What are you? You're a Nazi. Like you do the whole thing where it's like, oh, you're in a Nazi uniform, right? It says IDF at the moment.
And it goes back to your point about literacy and how you were enlightened, because the majority of those people in that, in that community are illiterate. They're unread, they're unsophisticated, and they
Wait, who are we talking
blindly, they're Christian Zionists, the Christian belt, the American
got
Christian
you.
belt.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've been heavily indoctrinated, same as the Jews, by their religious institutions, by the government, and by every media outlet, right? There's no media outlets really who are like, hey, you're a Christian. Did you know that literally everything you've learned is a lie? Like that's not super common. So it's a lot of people having to like figure things out for themselves and like traverse, we're talking about pulling people out of the river, but it's like, what if the river is flowing upstream? Like we are losing people, right? We're barely pulling people out of the river. Like the current is so strong going the other way that it's almost impossible to save people. And so, a lot of people are illiterate because they've grown up in communities that the government has neglected and doesn't care about and has taken advantage of and used as pawns of imperialism, right? Because if they are dumb and they can't read and they don't have these like options, then they join the military and they sacrifice themselves at the altar of U.S. imperialism.
Have you seen Lions for Lambs? Robert Redford, Andrew Carthy, the Spider-Man, Glenn Close, Tom Cruise, 2007, 2008. You must watch it.
Wow, I feel like you're an IMDb right now. This is great.
Lions for Lambs. I love films, but I love films that actually talk shit. Robert Redford would not be in any film unless it meant something, but you would love it. Lions for Lambs. You'll resonate with it. It's excellent. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I want to wrap it up with talking about, bringing it back to today and Gaza and the fact that the bullshit still rings, the propaganda, the narrative, it's still being touted, and American politicians everywhere, people on the bandwagon of the Zionists are still pushing it out there. It seems like the truth doesn't matter. It seems, they refuse, even when it's presented to them, refuse to accept the truth when it's presented by reliable and credible sources. They all stick to the original narrative. My last sort of question to you, and I know you've sort of suggested something earlier, but what is it we can do? How can we best fight these lies, but more importantly, continue to contribute effectively to humanity and this moral battle that the world is fighting right now? Because for me, this isn't a military war. This isn't a political war. This isn't a financial war. We are in a battle for our morality.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I would say that you should take time. It's incumbent upon everybody to take time and educate yourself, because we've all been misled. We've all been fed a lie. We've all been subject to white supremacist propaganda. We've all been basically brainwashed, right, into believing that the United States and the occupation of Palestine are sustainable. And they're not. They're both settler colonies, and they both will fall. And the sooner we familiarize ourselves with the texts of the martyrs, the people who have walked this path before us, the quicker we will liberate our own minds, right, from the mental gates of the occupation and the US propaganda, the media blitz that surrounds you. You start to see through it, right? You start to be able to dissect it and recognize, oh no, that's a lie. Oh no, I know that this isn't true. Oh no, I saw on Instagram, that's a lie. So you start to discredit the official mainstream source, and then you open yourself up to really learning about the history of indigenous people who were colonized all over the world, whether it's in Turtle Island, or whether it's in Palestine, or whether it's in Lebanon, right? And
or
you start
Australia.
to learn about or anywhere, yes, all over the world. You learn about indigenous self-defense, right? You learn about enslaved revolts. You learn about the counter culture to a dominant narrative. And if you're somebody who identifies with an underdog, as Jews ought to do, then you start to recognize that your struggle is that struggle, right? And that you can do nothing better with your life than devote your life to that struggle. And yes, there will be consequences because you're fighting something very powerful, but this path is a noble path, and the people who have walked before us have done so with their full chest out, right? They have really leaned into being who they were, and it's important that everybody do that, right? The resistance in Palestine, the resistance in Lebanon is made up of ordinary people, and it could be made up of ordinary people in Turtle Island as well. If people in the West, the white settlers, right, who claim to be in solidarity with Palestine, if they were really willing to risk everything, like if they were really willing to risk losing white privilege, losing capitalism, losing US imperialism, if they were willing to escalate in a way that put those things in the dustbin of history where they belong, then this thing could be over pretty quickly, but there's a lot of people who are selfish. There's a lot of people who are scared. There's a lot of people who are cowards, gelatinous invertebrates who will do nothing. But I'm not one of them. So I would encourage people to get involved. I would encourage people to listen to resources like the Palestine Pod, like your show, PalestineAcademy.com, Decolonize Palestine. All of those are great resources to learn more about Palestine, and then get involved in your local community as well. Get involved in mutual aid in your local community. Get involved in direct action in your local community. Search for weapons manufacturers in your local community. And, give them a little interior decoration. That's been my time. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure, Michael. And look, it doesn't have to be so hard, but you're absolutely right. There's so many ways that we can get active and involved, and people need to start by learning. I know so many people think it's a headache and, it's not my thing and it's not my problem, but it is your problem. And it's not that hard to, read a non-fiction in exchange for fiction, and educate yourself a little bit.
It is not that
hard. Yeah. Look, absolutely wonderful talking to you. I actually really enjoyed that, Michael, and I'll be in touch, but God bless you, and we'll continue to follow you. If there's anything urgent you want us to be part of or know about, just share it, DM, whatever way you want to communicate with us. And
thank you.
God bless you. And Lara, keep going with the Palestine Pod, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Bye now.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
Auditioned for representatives from the military, cruise lines, and it was like day 3 of the genocide. So I brought up Palestine, and I got feedback from my former manager, the military hates you. I was like, don't worry, it's mutual.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Real Talk and experiencing firsthand the real stories told by real people. I hope you found value and meaning and encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Your ongoing financial support is vital to our ability to continue delivering these stories, so please remember to click on the donate button in the description, giving only what you can afford. I spent my whole life giving my time, money and skill to serve human rights and social justice causes, and I know it's not easy to keep giving selflessly. But this work is important because the mainstream media has failed to live up to their obligations. So we need to step up, speak up, or we're no better than them. I believe by tuning in to this podcast, you are someone who wants to know the facts and the truth, so you can independently decide what to believe and what not to. My job is to deliver that information. Yours is to place a value on it. Whatever you decide is humbly welcome. Thanks again, and see you on the next episode of Real Talk.